what if the ultimate trick of the modern state was making you believe inflation is just a natural part of capitalism? In this episode of Bitcoin for Millennials, I talk with former pro athlete turned macro investor and Bitcoiner Brandon Gentile, and we bypass the fake red versus blue political drama to unpack what he calls the makers versus takers economy. Waking up to how our current system is rigged breaks most people's minds because it forces them to admit their entire lives have been built on a lie, perpetuated by other people no better than them. And stick around to learn Brandon's surprisingly hopeful reason for why he welcomes the slow, patient grind of going through the transition of separating money and state, which could bring us back into an age of building toward an abundant future. If you're enjoying my content, it would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to the channel and like my video to support my journey. Thanks a lot. Now let's dive into this episode. Brandon Gentile, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Bram, so good to see you, man. Wish we could hang on more. We're a little bit far apart, but it's so good to spend time with you. We've already had a good back chat, so
likewise. Yeah, it was time to press record. Man, I'd love to explore your Bitcoin thoughts. I think your story is very interesting, and I also think that you are always, curious person, and you're also into topics that I'm into, but I think also way deeper on some. So I'm happy to learn from you. I asked you what you wanted to talk about before, and so you sent me some stuff. I know you're writing a book. Let's just explore.
Yeah, no, it's so good to be here, man. And you've done so much good work over time, and we need 10,000 more people like you doing this. And like we said, in the back chat, it's just patience. We talked about the civil wars going on in Bitcoin. We talked about the craziness going on in politics right now. Obviously, people are wondering what's going on with Mitch McConnell, and all of a sudden Lindsey Graham drops dead. It's just a wild time we live in, and it's patience, right? Like, patience is the name of the game. There's no shortcutting money for the world, none of it. Like, it's patience, building slowly over time and bringing people to your side. There's just no shortcutting that process.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate it. I also think there couldn't be enough Bitcoin podcasts or just in general, what is money type podcasts,
Educators.
right? Yeah, because this illusion runs very deep. And I think also, when you are on Bitcoin Twitter and you see the infighting and all this stuff like that, which, by the way, I partially think is caused by the fact that, a lot of us hope that a lot more people recognize this as well way more quickly than what is actually happening, which is funny because Bitcoin is all about proof of work and low time preference, and some people still lack that even though they are into Bitcoin, right? And so I think people need a villain, they need stuff to do and whatnot. And I don't know, man. I think being positive and just trying to build is more fun and has more value than just dooming and glooming and blackpilling and whatever. I think that's kind of tiring, to be honest.
It is what it is. We have to adapt and overcome, and it goes back to the makers versus takers. To me, that's the economy going forward. It's just we've gone beyond this red versus blue, fake prison of two ideas to now it's communism versus maybe capitalism, some form of capitalism. And we can explore this in a second, because I think that capitalism is a little bit, people don't know exactly what capitalism is. And that's actually causing a massive problem. And so I think that's an interesting thing, but makers versus takers. And to your point, we need people building, and there's so many people looking around and just saying, hey, like, what can I take from other people? And just complaining, bitching and moaning online, on Twitter, whatever it might be, instead of building stuff and doing things. And for some reason, humans, we tend to look around and try to tear other cities down or other buildings down instead of building our own buildings and trying to build the biggest building. We think that tearing other buildings down is going to be a faster approach. To me, that's the economy, whether it's the energy going forward, producing energy, channeling energy. That to me is going to be the different thing. Can you build faster than the communist, collectivist, Marxist personality types take from you? Can we build faster than the other people can take from us, right? So that's it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a great starting point. I think your comment on capitalism, I think we never really truly experienced actual capitalism, just because of the money that we're using. At least we didn't. We have not experienced that in our lifetimes, or also I'd say recent history. And you mentioned energy, right? And so what I've lately been trying to focus on, what I want to focus on is, when we talk about Bitcoin, why does Bitcoin even exist? Like just the bigger picture idea, right? I think that, and this is one of the things that, is the topic of all the infighting and the civil war and whatnot. The technology can change, right? The technological implementation, etc., can change of any technology, any business, any idea, etc. But like, there's a reason of existence or not, right? But with the topic of Bitcoin and money is money. It's just so huge and so connected, so distorted, abstracted, that it's very hard to, I think, see what is happening. And I know from experience that for different people, it's different hooks and touch points that actually get them to a point where they're like, maybe, I should look a little further into this. So I really want to explore that more, because I think just pitching the solution of Bitcoin doesn't really help. Like the fiat illusion runs really deep, right? And so you just mentioned energy, and I know that you say, energy is the control function basically of everything, right? And I agree. Any technological progression or innovation is basically packaging more energy in a smaller unit, basically, right? Whether it's cheaper or more accessible physically, digitally, whatever, it's a compression of energy into a smaller unit. So my simplest example of that is, first you had 20 monks writing, copying 20 Bibles each in a month or 2 months, right? And the book printing press came along and did the 20 books in 1 or 2 days, right? So it's compressing more energy into like a smaller thing, thus making you more productive. But for someone who just sees prices going up in a grocery store, I think it's very hard to connect the dots between all the pieces of the machine together. How do you think through that in terms of global energy, the use of energy? How does energy dictate the reality or the economic reality? Most people stop too early with Bitcoin. They buy it, maybe move it to a wallet, and think they are done. But they're not. The real questions are how you're securing it, how private your setup is, and whether you're verifying your own transactions or trusting someone else. And what happens to your Bitcoin when something happens to you? This is the layer that most people ignore, and it's the most important one. That's why I've been working with the Bitcoin Way. They help you set up self-custody properly, including privacy, cybersecurity, inheritance, and even running your own node. And they do it without ever touching your Bitcoin. They're not a custodian, they're your support team. If you're serious about this like I am, go to thebitcoinway.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to book a free call. They'll walk you through your setup, personalize everything to you, and help you get a much stronger position very quickly, whether you're a beginner or more advanced. That's thebitcoinway.com/Bram.
Yeah, I mean, we're vibes-based creatures at the end of the day, and people discount the vibes. It's kind of become a meme, like a joke almost in a way, but we're vibes creatures. I'm a big FOMO guy. I'm a night owl. I've always been like that my entire life. Hockey was a big culprit to that. Late games, trying to wind down, but just the vibes, energy, the music, get the locker room going, stuff like that. But when you see people or kids, the music turns on, people start dancing, and then you juxtapose that with, and you could go down these rabbit holes to talk about that, but then you juxtapose that with, like you just said, Bitcoin, and people seeing the properties, or all of us Bitcoiners trying to tell people about the properties of Bitcoin, which could be wonderful. They could be the best money, maybe probably the first money, in my belief, that humans have ever had to really hit every single property of what money's supposed to be. Well, how come it's not accepted yet? How come in 2010 it wasn't just accepted by the world? Well, the answer lies within the emotional state of human beings. We're not rational beings. We're illogical, maybe not illogical, but we're emotional beings. And so we have this world, and Saylor has talked about this, ironically, a number of years ago. He said the biggest threat to Bitcoin, before this, all the spam wars, all the things we've been talking about in the last 2 years, he said there's people not accepting this. And you were talking about this in the back chat, or before he started, that again, you can have the perfect money in the world, but if no one cares about it, or the culture is destroyed, or et cetera, then who wants it, right? Like right now, Bitcoin's a 4-letter word. So it can have the best properties. It can be the only real true money that exists. But if humans don't care because they're emotionally charged, or they've been told something else their entire life for 100+ years, and how does a fish know he's wet if he's been in the water his whole life? That's what we're living in. So money is psychological. Money is an emotional thing, and that's this war that we're fighting in. So the channeling of energy, all this, the vibes, that's the culture that we're in, and understanding that. And people hear that with sales, right? You have to sell with emotion and then justify with logic. Like, people have heard it many different ways. It's been explained over through life, but to me, that's everything. And it's the power. It goes back to the energy. Can you create more? Like, do you want to? Because again, we can tell people about 21 million. Clearly that works for some people, the INTJs, right? Maybe those of us that are here, a couple 100,000 people on Earth, or 1 million people, maybe that are true hardcore, rabid Bitcoiners across the globe of 8 billion people. But really, this is why it ties back into the makers, takers, the emotions, the vibes. Because if you can show people, hey, and this is where the Lamborghinis, the Moon Boy stuff, the crypto crowd, there is something to that. Because whether we want to admit it or not, humans, we want those things. We want to have status. We want to have these things that we can point to and be like, oh, that guy's successful, or he did something. I want that. And so, and you got to be careful with that, and the 7 deadly sins and things like that. You got to be, jealousy, greed, envy, stuff like that. But there is something to that where Bitcoiners, we get very Puritan, and I'm very guilty of stuff like this, of being very Puritan, and then not understanding that most people aren't like that. Most people, we say normies. Well, most people think like that. We're very emotional, and they just want higher status. They want to have more money at the end of their months. They want to have a Lamborghini. Whatever it might be. And so sometimes Bitcoiners, we can do a disservice to that because we get so Puritan, we get so textbook with, well, it should be this way. In reality, that's not a lot of times how life plays out. So all that being said, we just have to be careful with what's going on. But a lot of it's just patience. And that, like we said earlier, there's no shortcutting all of this. It's just power projection over time, the persuasiveness of seeing things being built. Hey, do you want that Bitcoin freedom citadel over there? Digitally, physically, an actual citadel, a new city being built, new inventions, new things coming about from this group of people? Or would you like this dystopia with CBDCs and government, currencies, et cetera, where it's this hellscape and this digital panopticon where everything, Big Brother's controlling your whole life? Which one is it you want? And so we joke, we meme about these things about which way, anon, which way Western man, on and on and on. But there's a lot of truth to that, where we're in this power projection world where who can control the energy, who can channel the energy, who can show the average person, not tell them, but show them a different world, be different people, build different things. And then society is going to choose over time, hey, I want these people over here, or I want this dystopia, just government run, hellscape. That's the big thing to me that we're really entering now. And like we were saying earlier, it's beyond red versus blue. That's, it's really a state versus you, but it's this collectivism versus individualism, or collectivism versus individual sovereignty fight that we're in which side are we going to choose? And can the individual sovereignty people, can they build faster and produce more and be a better vibe shift, a vibe culture than these people over here who just want to tear everything else down? So that to me that's that marketing arm going forward for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because this whole idea of energy comes back in different fractals in Bitcoin, right? And I think you think I touched more on the human energy, like where is your creative energy going, right? And I've talked about this extensively before, but I think Fiat, the Fiat illusion, enchantment, whatever you want to call it, is just such a distortion for people to even either have space and time to ponder and just think and reflect and understand, what they are actually part of.
Yeah.
Which is in my mind part of the Fiat scam, right? But secondary,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't allow you to think about, okay, where do I want to point my energy, my limited energy, right? My limited life energy in the time that I have. And I think that, with Bitcoin, we have this idea of how we could do it. And I think a lot of people find don't know, hope or strength or whatever in that, right? But Bitcoin is still an experiment. If 99 plus percent of the world is still asleep to the fact that fiat money is a scam, then we're still not right, even though it might conceptually work, and all the consequential philosophical explorations make sense and are nice and all that stuff. If people don't accept it, it's not going to be money, and it's not gonna work, right? And I find that tension just interesting, because Bitcoin is money by definition. It characteristic by its characteristics, it is money.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But if I offer you Bitcoin right now for something that you deliver to me and you don't accept Bitcoin, it's not money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a big gap between like the rational, and the social or something, where arguably there is no fake Bitcoin, and it's the most neutral and the most trustworthy, and blah blah, all these technical things. But people need to wake up to the fiat money scam, which is probably a way bigger endeavor than the creation of Bitcoin, which was searched for like 40, 50 years, right? Like all the predecessors, all the like ideas and explorations that eventually culminated into Bitcoin, plus what Satoshi did himself, right, is what eventually ended up in the technical part of Bitcoin being Bitcoin. But the acceptance of a larger group of people, of enough people, I think is the main issue that is just extremely hard to achieve.
And it's tough, obviously, because we're living through it. We're living through the chaos. We're living through the learning, the growth, the maturation, the changing of the seasons, the changing of generations, changing of the guard. That's not easy to go through, especially when you see something, when you think you know something, and we believe we're all correct, and I think we are. I think we have the logic, the reasoning, the math is behind us, right? All of those things. So that generally, if you're holding yourself to those standards, in the long run, you should be correct, and usually nature will show that that's the correct way. But it takes time, and this is where all the shortcuts come in, where we're trying to shortcut these processes. Or it doesn't mean that you don't go out and invent new ways to do things, or new products and services, or whatever it may be. Of course, you do that. But even like the last 100+ years, because of this fiat scam, like you said, I think 100 years from now, people will look back and think we're in a modern dark age, or that we were in a modern dark age, because again, it goes back to this collectivist. It looks like we've had a lot of things, and people have, people now live like kings did 500 years ago, and the average middle class person or whatever. But where did the Jetsons age go? Like, how come we don't have all the flying cars ever? How come we don't have those things? How come it was a century of global war, hundreds of millions of people dead, just constant war, constant war? And how come the century before that was the Industrial Revolution, where we were actually inventing things, like real invention, plane, train, automobile, all these things that happened right before we had global fiat currencies, in essence? That to me is interesting, and it's just not talked about enough, where we switch from real invention, real progress, and humanity just exponentially increasing, free banking, and then they want to sell you panic. Well, there's a lot of panic, so you know that, right? Some people lost their fortunes. It's like, well, I just watched hundreds of million people lose their life over the last 100 years, though, during central banking and fiat. And so it's this trade-off that government-run schools, the central banking class, and the East India Company, all these different people over the last 400 years, they want to sell you this. Hey, I control the money, I control the rules. I'm not going to tell you any of that, though. And then you just get to fight and play down here underneath. And because of that, we've accepted this, because of the not knowing and not understanding this, and being the frog in the boiling pot. And so we just accepted it, because that's what we were born into. And now we're in a place where people are looking around and like, well, what happened? Well, we were just living this last 100 years like on fumes, where we had some invention, but we've had a lot of iteration, though, just iterating on things, making better mousetraps instead of just inventing new things. So that to me is what's interesting. I think that's what people are starting to realize again. We hear a lot about the Hamilton system now, and from 200 years ago, Hamilton and Henry Clay in the American system. And we know that every time, basically the couple presidents that have tried to institute that or put that back into America have got shot and killed, or just shot. Donald Trump being one of those. And so if you listen to Scott Bessent, Marco Rubio, JD Vance, they all will talk consistently about the American system. And this is something that we mentioned with capitalism earlier. I'm just getting into this. I'm some of my just studies over time, of putting into this, but what it looks like to me, and this is something that people can go start studying themselves, because I'm been diving down these rabbit holes now, is whether it's John Locke or Adam Smith or some of these, great capitalists over time. What I was unaware of is that they may have potentially been propagandists for the East India Company. And I did not know that. So laissez-faire capitalism of just, hands off, the free market's going to do whatever it wants. This is where I think Bitcoiners and free market people, free trade people, libertarians, capitalists, generally a lot of Republicans on the right for a long time may have been believing something that wasn't totally true, and me included, as one of those people, where you have a world where we think that the free market is just going to take care of everything. It's just like throw it out into the world, and like if we have a free market, well, the free market will just figure out. And then you start putting it together, and you're like, well, then I'll introduce you to Genghis Khan, and Genghis Khan is also in the free market, and he will come, and anyone who's bigger, badder, and stronger than you will just run you over. They will cheat, they will lie, they will steal, they will do whatever, and they don't care. So the free market is the free market, you will say, someone will say. But then I will introduce to you some malignant dictator, or I'll introduce you the next guy and the next guy. And so at some point you realize, hey, there's this protocol, there's this rule set, there's these things that we have to follow if we want some semblance of X, Y, and Z. And if we don't want that, then that's cool too. That's fine with me. We just need to understand that and go along and say, okay, may the biggest, baddest man win. So that's where, like, again, some of my anarchist friends and things of that nature, I respect it. I don't think we're going to be in a capitalist system going forward. It's going to be some form of like anarchism, capitalism, voluntarism, Bitcoinism, sound moneyism type of world going forward. Some aggregation. Maybe it's a new system going forward where it's not going to just be one of those. You mentioned this earlier too, where you can't have true capitalism if you're on fiat currencies, and that's part of this scam that's been run as well, where people think that inflation is part of capitalism, and they're actually separate. Yeah. Like the economic system is different than the bedrock monetary layer, and people just conflate them together, right? And this is crazy. As I've talked to many financial bros, Wall Street guys, over time, not Bitcoiners, but like just finance bros, they think inflation is part of capitalism. And so it's just complete mind bend, history bending and changing of what we've been taught over time, and being very careful of where you're getting information. And so whether it's the East India Company controlling, much of the world and what we're seeing here today, this is why people are freaking out when Trump's talking to China or Russia or India, because those people, newsflash, they can't stand Britain. And when America's in bed with Britain and we keep getting back into bed with Britain, then people don't like that. The rest of the world's like, hey, we're out because these people are raping and pillaging us for hundreds of years and we're not. I don't like it. So see ya. And so again, that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could get down. But that's this American system coming back into the foray. And so that to me is some of the big, huge stories of whether it's capitalism or the crown or whatever whatever path you want to take. Those are the things to me that are the most interesting. And unfortunately, most of society is just completely oblivious to it. Most of politics is oblivious. Most Bitcoiners are oblivious to it. And it's unfortunate, but I think going back to time, this is just patience and time and these things being unearthed and people start slowly learning about it.
Yeah. I've gone on some rabbit hole trips. I remember around, the whole American experiment, this idea around ultimate freedom. And recently I actually watched a video. It was with a Dutch professor, and he talked about how freedom and equality don't exist together, right? Like, so if you want more equality, if you're gonna make two people more, at the same level, you're by definition taking freedom away from one of these two people, right? And so if you then look at he was really talking about like nature, right? Like if you look at nature is an ultimate free capitalistic society, right? Because it is a free for all. There are bonds in species. There are synergies between these fish that are sucked on to sharks, right? Or there's like birds that clean bisons or apes, or what I mean? Like there's synergies between plants and animals and other organisms and other animals and whatnot, right? So, but have you ever seen a tree stop growing, right? Or have you ever seen a deer in the headlights, or getting confronted with some predator, being like, yeah, okay, whatever, like this is going to be it? Like, no, right? Like it is what it is, literally. And I think when we translate that to like a free market, I'm trying to get a coherent thought, right? Like, I feel that the manipulation by fiat money introduces so much, or fiat money in general introduces so much chaos. It distorts the opportunity to actually figure out together what is a free market, right? Maybe you first need like a radical free capitalistic market to then figure out, okay, there are always bad actors. So what do we do with bad actors? Well, maybe, and it's funny because this in my mind already kind of sounds stupid, or it goes towards centralization. Well, we need some rules, right? There need to be some rules, but some rules are also basic that literally 95% of people would agree with by definition. I don't know, don't steal, or stuff like that. So he was talking about how the freedom part is actually more aligned with nature than the forcing of equality, right? And there's this kind of like trap that the humans fall into because of their intellect, right? That they think like, well, the world is so malleable and we can use policy and rules, or monetary policy, right? We can use that to influence the behavior of people. But eventually I'm thinking like, but there you have to show that it works. Does that make sense, right? Like, you can say that and it sounds nice and reasonable, but if it doesn't work, right? If we plateau in our development, literally what is happening right now, right? It's sometimes I feel like we're going backwards in times in terms of quality and beauty and all these things that you probably also talked about. All the fiat money stuff. There's no clear argument that shows this is why fiat money is great, right? And I just did something very basic. I just Googled what is capitalism, right? And then the first answer on Google is this Gemini AI summary. It says capitalism is an economic and political system where private individuals or businesses own the means of production, like factories, land, and tools, rather than the government. Economic decisions, pricing, and the distribution of goods are driven by voluntary exchange, market competition, and the motive to generate profit. And then at the bottom it says criticisms. While proponents argue capitalism drives innovation and economic prosperity, critics, including Marxist economics, point out several inherent flaws. These include the tendency toward mass income inequality, cyclical economic crises, i.e. recessions, and the potential for market failures or environmental degradation. There's a nice pot of different things, not necessarily related, but what I think is so interesting, I think they're both wrong, right? Like it says, driven by voluntary exchange, market competition, and a motive to generate profit. Like conceptually, yes, but if you're using fiat money to do the economic activity in a capitalistic economic system, then there is like this third party that needs the fiat money to not fail, right?
Yep.
I mean, the U.S. government has shares in Intel, or in whatever. Right. They're talking about getting shares in the AI companies, in the whatever. So, and the biggest beneficiary of fiat money is a government, right? So there's instantly this conflict of interest, where like on the other side, right, the Marxist economists, they say like the tendency toward mass inequality, cyclical economic crises, right? Like those are two different things, right? Like the economic crises are natural, right? Like everything that goes up goes down and up and down and whatnot. I think they're accelerated by fiat money. But like the mass income equality, yeah, I mean, some people can do things other people can't, right? And that's okay, right? Yep. If you don't want that to be, then you're anti-freedom, right? So I know it's a little tangent, but I think it's an important subject because, as you said, the whole capitalist idea, I think the arguments against it are more coming from the fact that fiat money is so bad, what, if people are anti-capitalist, I think they are talking about the problems that fiat money creates, not the general basic idea of, let's say, a free market economy. Every Bitcoiner hits this moment. You need cash, maybe for a house deposit, an emergency, or a tax bill, and you're staring at your stack thinking, do I really want to sell this? Here's the thing, you don't have to. You can borrow against your Bitcoin instead, so there's also no taxable event and your stack can keep on stacking. This is where Firefish comes in, a peer-to-peer marketplace for Bitcoin-backed loans. And Firefish is not a lender. They built a protocol that makes this all possible, which is exactly why they never, ever have to touch your Bitcoin. During your loan, your Bitcoin sits in an on-chain multisig secured by open source code. You can find offers for different amounts, durations, and rates at firefish.io. And when you decide to get a loan, you can use code BRAM to get 30% off your first loan's fees. That's firefish.io and code BRAM.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. I mean, communism itself is, it's spawned out of that, right? It's the malincentives created by piss poor currencies, government currencies, right? Like it spawns out of that. So it's misplaced. That you think it's the system that's wrong when really it's the accounting mechanism of the system that's just destroying the entire system. And I always give the analogy of when you have an oil spill upstream, there's whatever, the oil wells at the top of the river, and then someone punches a hole in it, and now it's infecting and going through and permeating the entire river downstream. And much of what we see now in life and government or nonprofits or anything in the world is all basically people 5, 10, 100, 1,000 miles downstream with a pool skimmer trying to clean the oil out. And then it's like, well, I've got a new pool skimmer that can do a better thing. Instead of everyone just going to the hole upstream at the top of the stream and just cleaning that up and just fixing the hole. That's what we've been dealing with. And so now people say, well, I've got a different system. We can go to a different stream. We can go from this capitalism stream. We can go to this communist stream. Let's just start, so like there's all these different things that people are trying to do instead of just getting to the root of the problem. And and you see it everywhere. I had a guy that George Noble, I think he's a big macro guy. And I think I'm blocked by like 3 people on Twitter total. Usually I don't cause too much stirs. I'm not like Bram. I don't cause too many stirs on Twitter. And he
dude, I'm blocked by a lot of fucking people, dude.
Oh man, no, Bram treats like it's a hockey game. It's a hockey arena. I love it. I wish I did more. I think
blocking is very weak.
I do too. So there's 3 people that have blocked me. I think George Noble's one of them. Okay. And he said something a while ago, and a bunch of Bitcoiners piled on him. And I had just tweeted, basically, it was just like, George, unfortunately, doesn't, something to the effect of, he doesn't have the humility to see that the system he's measuring with, or I forgot how I said it, he's measuring with the tool that's, the incorrect tool, but he won't have the humility to see it, in essence, paraphrasing it. And he was like, I forgot more than you know, and then blocked me. And then so, people were like, wow, I can see what you mean about ego and stuff like that.
I forgot more than you know. That's fine.
Yeah, it was it worked perfectly.
That's good. I love that.
It was wild. And I was like, I'm sure you do, but that's the problem. Like the 80 IQ pleb should be able to get ahead in life. Like, do we really think the creator of this earth, in all of its infinite wisdom, do you think he really made a world where you've got to have 180 IQ just to like get along and have some subsistence in your life? No, of course not. Like that, like you said, that goes against the laws of nature. Like that works. That's imperfect. Like that doesn't. It's a big contrast towards like being a free market and just nature doing its thing. So it doesn't make any sense. And so when you start from that world, and all these analogies we give, whether it's the stream, you can see, or patience, like we talked about earlier, all these things are self-evident. But because we're so far downstream, and we talked about the Declaration of Independence, or I do a lot. America's 250th. I've been kind of looking into those documents more, revisiting them, stuff like some people reading them for the first time. And you think about self-evident truths. What are self-evident truths? Like I don't need a dictator. I don't need a king. I don't need a president or a prime minister telling me what my rights are. That's not how life works. I have these are God-given. Like these are from the creator. These are beyond man. So man can't change them. These are self-evident, natural law, first principle truth. And so that to me is really interesting, because we talked about this earlier too. The biggest, baddest guy comes in. Well, that's government at the end of the day. Right now, Genghis Khan is taking shape of a government in essence, and they're the biggest, baddest guy at the end of a barrel of a gun, and it's the version we have right now. Like it or love it or not, just knowing the timeline we're on, I think is very important. And so going back to this capitalism and communism and
Yeah,
things
sorry.
like that.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
reminds me of what I wanted to say about the American experiment. Is literally what you're talking about, right? Like, okay, if there's like a free state that has accepted terms and conditions, right? Basically,
Yeah. Bill of
the
Rights,
yes,
Constitution.
exactly,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
It's like that's it. It's funny, right? Because I do think it's similar to Bitcoin in a way, right? This whole idea
It
with
is.
with decentralization, etc. Like this, the set of rules, land of the free, home of the brave. But you got to be brave to be free, right? Like for me, that's the whole that's
Yeah.
like
They go hand
that's
in
an
hand.
amazing sentence,
Yep.
right? Land of the free, home of the brave. You know, you can come here. It's a free for all. It's ultimate freedom, but that's fucking rough. Like it's a rough. It's a difficult thing, right?
Yep.
And there will always be people that will say like, hey, I can be your savior, vote for me, give me more power, etc. And that's where the amendments and stuff come in, right? Especially the Second Amendment, for example.
Yep.
At least from a Euro poor point of view, this is my
yes
this is my point of view.
Absolutely.
Right? And we don't understand the gun part in Europe, etc. But I think we don't understand because we thought we wouldn't need it, right? But in America, it's like conceptually again, right? Eventually, what it looks like now is pretty far away, I would say, from the original idea, right? There are certain cultural elements that are still there, but that's why I mentioned that American experiment. That was the original idea.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because it made me think of something else as well. The founding fathers talked a lot about, this is why it's perfect time with the 250th. Like I've been doing a lot of research, reading Thomas Paine's Common Sense, been going over the American Crisis that he wrote again a bit. Obviously, the Declaration, just unbelievable documents. And, some of the founding fathers, they wrote about the American experiment won't work unless there's a moral, ethical, religious, just people. And this goes back to the protocol we talk about. And this is why Bitcoin is interesting too, because this is a problem that we see with Bitcoin. We see it with politics. We see it with libertarians. So libertarian, I've been dunking on them a lot over the last little while. And I'm one of those people, generally speaking. And so for a long time, those libertarians walked away. I give the example, if anyone's ever seen the movie of Field of Dreams, and where the baseball players come out of the field and they just start playing. He if you build it, they will come. Builds a baseball park in his backyard, and all the legends start coming playing. But they would go back into the field and they would just disappear. And so that's a lot of what we've seen in politics, because people have been so disillusioned by fiat. Again, oil spill at the top of the river, and you can't, as we know as well, you cannot have good fruit, good, honest society from dishonest money. You can't have good fruit from a bad tree. These things are all very self-evident, first principle, natural things that we, again, used to be taught in school, or they're just self-evident things. But now we're so distracted by so many of the malincentives of society that we don't even know what's up from down and left from right anymore. And so, as everyone's arguing 10 miles downstream. So you have this world where what's the easiest way to win a sporting event if the other team forfeits? And what does the devil want? He wants a cheap win. He's the agent of chaos. So what does he do? He breaks the people's will. He breaks people's will to even live, which we're seeing now, which is the MAID program in Canada. We have illegal and illegal drugs everywhere, all over the place. So people just trying to sedate and get out of life. Like I'm so broken. I don't even know why I'm broken, but I just want to check out. And that's the agent of destruction. And that's how do you, when I go to a hockey game and the other team forfeits, like I'm at a tournament, I got 6 games in the weekend, and then one team forfeits, that's an easy win. Like, phew, thanks. Like that. Now I don't have to expend that energy. And that's what the devil wants. He wants those cheap, easy wins. He wants their will broken. And so we're at a point now where many of the good people in society, the people that have the answers, the libertarians, Bitcoiners, you see it a lot. Like, I'm not voting. I'm done voting. Then you go to the election itself and you see that only 10% of the people voted, or 12%, or 20% of the whole population voted. That is crazy. But if you just had a 1, 2, 3% of those people, those really good base people that just said, I'm walking back into the field of dreams, I'm disappearing back into the corn stalks, guess what changes? Everything changes. And people not even being into local politics, they're not, because that's how America was founded as well. It was very localized. They wanted local governance. You knew what Bram was doing down the road. You knew what Brandon was doing. You knew what John was doing and Jane, and you knew. But now when you're in, Brussels, Belgium, and you're trying to, dictate the whole Eurozone, or you're in Washington, D.C., and you're trying to dictate for, someone in Seattle, Washington, 3,000 miles away, good luck. And that's where we've devolved to. And then people just get more entrenched, more pissed off. And then they check out more and more and more. And then it devolves into the inferiors, sane asylums being run by the agents of chaos inside. And I think it was Plato or Aristotle that talked about that as well, thousands of years ago. If you're not involved in politics or involved in your community, in essence, you'll be governed by your inferiors. And that is why there's such chaos, because of the malincentives, because of the money being broken, because people have been so checked out. You see that going down the stream. We're down the end of the stream, Bram, and now we're dealing with all the oil, and we're just marred by all of it. And we're like, what do we do? And so here we are. We're at the turning of all this. And as my dad has said, he's just been saying, like, you used to read about these things in history books, and he's like, it just sucks. You got to live through it. Like we are living through all of it now. So buckle up.
Yeah. I mean, that and this, I think this is the big topic for me, is this, like, this realization that you're actually there and you can see it. You can make that conclusion that, if you're not doing it, someone else is doing it. Do you want to outsource that responsibility to that other person? If you think they are idiots, you got to do something about it, right? But then you can't, because you don't have time and space, because the money is losing its value. You're working your ass off,
working 3 jobs,
right?
Yep.
Right. Yeah, but
Yep.
but that's the real issue, in my opinion. Yep. That gap becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. The inactivity of people becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, they let themselves be steamrolled into some sort of CBDC prison thing, whatever, it's better money, or, or whatever the TV says. And that I find hard to observe. And I mean, I try to do something in my own way, right? But I do think it's hard. And for example, you also wrote about how rich people just, they can exit this system. We've seen, Peter Thiel move to Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think that's random, right? There's this idea. I'm not a Peter Thiel fan, but I do think it's a signal. So, in you had a quote where you said, like, you need guns, gold, grub, food, and
5 Gs.
and Bitcoin, Bitcoin.
Yep.
That sounds intense to a lot of people, and very American, obviously, right?
Yeah.
How do you think through this? How can people practically exit this system that's basically designed to trap you, eventually, even just with your spirit, right? Like, you're just stuck.
Yeah. And that's, like you said, Bram, I think this is the question of our time. And this is the question. This is the only question, because it goes beyond Bitcoin. And that's where it's tough, because we talked about the civil wars before we start a little bit in Bitcoin, and we all get so wrapped up and so myopic at times. But, wars are fought on many battlefronts, and this is why I go back to the voting thing. You got to vote. There's generally 5 ways to vote. And it used to be the ammo box and the ballot box. And now we have voting with your money, voting with your feet, and voting with your voice. We really didn't have those 3 ways, generally speaking, for a long time. For most of human history, it wasn't easy to, at least. And now it's so easy. So now we have 5 ways to vote. Hopefully the ammo box is the last, and we never have to use that. But now you should be pushing back on the actual voting, and then with your money. So saving a Bitcoin, producing more than you earn, saving a Bitcoin, self-custody. And then getting loud, using your voice, using social media, talking to your family and friends, being in your local, whatever, chamber of commerce, your local school board, your local, city councils, whatever it might be. Just imagine if 1% of good people did that across the United States, for instance, how different the ripple effect would be and life would be. And so that to me is some of these things that we just kind of lost, because this goes beyond Bitcoin. You can't, trying to just, hey, we're going to try to rug pull the whole system and change it with Bitcoin. As we were talking offline again, this is a patient game. It's patience. You need patience, and there's nuance to it. It's not going to just happen overnight, because we had countries say we're using Bitcoin. It's legal tender, or the leader of the free world, Donald Trump, saying and talking about Bitcoin in the last 2 years, and going to the Bitcoin conference. That didn't do anything. Like, that's not adoption. And so people themselves, hopefully, don't have to touch a stove. We don't have to get hurt first. Hopefully we can just learn by other people's mistakes, learn from history, be educated on it. But we know, unfortunately, that's not all the way. That's not the way humans are generally going to go about it. But if it is, then it probably takes another 10 years, 20 years, 30, 50 years of just education, people seeing it over time. And so part of that is, again, it goes back to what we were saying too, with building stuff and just continually building, doing what you can, putting your head down, save more than you spend each month, but building and being that persuasive element that people can see and look to and say, hey, I want that in my life. Again, going back to communism, and capitalism, and talk about this wealth gap, you're always going to have a wealth gap. No matter what system you're in, no matter what money you're using, you're always going to have a wealth gap. The poor will always be among you. But we measure, because of fiat, because it's so infinite, so many infinite currency units, we get caught up in measuring the units themselves like that's our wealth. That's not the wealth. Wealth is time and energy. It's the people around you that you love. That's the wealth. Time and energy is what we want to. So what's your standard of living? Like, how do we measure that world? That to me is, again, these new units of measurement that are going to come about, which goes back to Scott Bessent. And people go back and watch their talks and what they've been talking about, especially the last 6-9 months. They've been talking about these very things. And I mean, look at Warsh, the new Fed head in America, obviously talking about those very things, saying old metrics are outdated. We want to actually measure energy. We want to measure standard of living, growth. Those are things where, and I forget that Trump or Bessent just had a quote the other day, and it was so good. And it was about that very thing, in essence, of we got caught up. It was either, people can go look it up, it was the Reagan Economic Council or thing that he did a couple weeks ago, or is a New York Economic Club that he just did recently as well. And he goes through this exact thing of, and to me, they're exposing things because it's not going to end with them. It's just this system that we all have to take going forward, or these thoughts at least, and take this and really start running with and extrapolating it going forward and showing people, hey, we need to look at different things and how we're valuing society and looking at society and just these very isolated metrics and that are in a vacuum. And so that to me is going to be the big thing of how do you portray this to people? How do we show people? How do you measure it? But also, what we said earlier, how do you build this new world? What are you doing to build it? Getting off the hamster wheel? Because like you said, how is it that someone learns and does all these things when they're on the hamster wheel? They're working a job or two, they're working overtime, and the system is so misaligned that they don't even have time to do X, Y, and Z thing. And the reason I talk about the 5Gs, and I've been thinking about these things for 20 years since I was a kid, because as a student of history, if you go back in history, obviously you can see the cycles very easily. And you see, hey, society goes from things are really good to then it collapses and things are really bad. And it becomes very easy to see where you are on these timelines. And you look at it and you say, hey, I know where the puck's going. I don't want it to go there. I want to stop it before it goes to that point. Get prepared, because we know from history as well, if people do get prepared and there's a couple % of people that step up and say, hey, I'm not doing this anymore, we're going a different direction, then society changes. It's a small irate minority that can change everything. It's not like we need to galvanize 90% of the world, because that will never happen. It's just, how can I control what I can control in my life, the people that are around me, and that's it. And then you focus on that, and that ripple effect, or the butterfly effect, or whatever people want to call it, that has a massive change on society. Instead of looking around, what is everyone else going to do for me, and getting sucked into your phone every day, just go do things, as we say in Bitcoin, right? You can just go do stuff, build things, and then people start coming your direction. And what's happening with the Trump stuff, I've seen it right now. Tons of people were against what was happening the last 6 or 9 months, but people are now being exposed to what was being unearthed. And you see a lot of people changing and saying, oh, geez, like this is wild. I didn't realize these things or connect these dots. Now I'm on that train now. And so that in real time, we have a political movement, in essence, not MAGA, not whatever. It's something else. It's an American system, this Hamilton Clay system that's being unearthed. And people are coming back to that as a power projection, saying, whoa, I didn't know about it. I forgot about it. Didn't realize the connections. That's what we need to do. And then we're going that direction. So it's an example of what we need to do as well in our own lives.
Yeah. I was thinking it is obviously extremely hypocritical of any American, government person tied to finance or wars, right? To say like, well, we should do things differently after we pillaged the fucking world and, exported all our inflation, right? But so where I'm at, so I also really, I love this topic, right? Like this whole idea of, the book you're writing is about separating money and state, right? And I wanted to ask you the question, like what happens when a state loses the monopoly on a money printer, right? But they know that this is a power vacuum, not only in America, right? With whatever states would want to break free and get together, new blocks and whatnot, but also globally, right? Just the whole power projection of having the currency hegemony in the world is extremely beneficial, right? Like literally just printing dollars to buy real energy in terms of oil is staggeringly brilliant. Is a staggeringly brilliant scam, right? But they did it anyway. And it's very clear that there is an ending to it. And I feel like on one side they're talking about this, right? Like it's kind of soft, like, we should do things differently. Energy, drill, and this putting these labels and these kind of like things in the zeitgeist. But then on the other side, they say like, there will never be a CBDC in the US, blah blah. But stable coins are obviously they're focusing on that extensively. Also, I would say a brilliant extension of the dollar scam, right? Connecting that to the treasury buying still. And the interesting thing was I thought about that last week, and I wonder what you think. So I think it's so blatantly obvious that US denominated stable coins are an extension of this debt system. I think wasn't it like lowest amount of foreign buyers of US treasuries ever? Like the interest rate is like $1 trillion, right? Like that is unmanageable, right? Like that's going to explode. So they need to create some way out. So that's US stable coins. Then in Europe, right, they're like, oh my God, we don't want, American dependence and blah, blah, So what we're going to do is we're going to build a digital euro, like it's not it's a CBDC, but that's it. And it's going to strengthen Europe and this and that and blah, blah. Like, do you think someone in Panama wants to receive the digital euro? Like, are they even allowed to receive it? Is the person in Europe actually allowed to send it, right? So my point eventually is by America showcasing that they're using the stable coins to luckily, I would say, create a new road to extend this treasury buying, at least, for now. It incentivizes all these other blocks and unions to come up with their own thing, right? You see that with the BRICS as well, but like it becomes so obvious that that currency, that money is controlled by a bloc or a country. Whereas with fiat, I don't know, in some way, at least for me, it felt like less before. It felt more equal, like exchange. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like it becomes so obviously clear, like, hey, this is my digital coin and this is my digital coin and this is my block's digital coin. That, like, do I want BRICS money? What the fuck? Right? Do you think the people in the BRICS countries care about me? Should I, like, it's so clear they don't care about me, so I don't want that money. So I think by the overt attempt by the US to extend the scam, they open up basically the global decentralized movement where, countries and blocks and whatnot are making their own digital currencies, which increases the distrust and kind of shines a light on the fact that this is the whole scam, right? I want you to trade in my money, right? I only want to trade with you if you accept my money, stuff like that. That actually opens the door to Bitcoin as the only neutral, decentralized, global, instant final settlement money that is there. So this is a long tangent, but I wonder what you think, if you see a similar thing, because I think it's so beautiful that eventually the fiat money solves itself just by imploding because it's just fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that this is where we go back to, and like what we've been talking about a lot of protocol, the rules, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, like these things can be changed. They're hard to change, right? Like to get an amendment passed in America to change to add an amendment to the Constitution, it's tough. It's very tough. Just like Bitcoin, it's not easy. It's very tough, and it should be. It should be a lot of nuanced debate. It should take a while. It should not be an emotional thing. We know when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. So these things have to take months, years to really happen, which is hard in a society where we want instant gratification. We see things all around the world instantaneously. That's what makes these things kind of hard. And this is where the patience thing comes back in as well. We also talked about the 20th century versus the 19th century. And we had free banking then. We had competing currencies in America, for instance, where you had all kinds of banks going down and failing because, at the time, again, when you have paper notes or you have physical coins, then it makes it very tough. It's in concept, it's wonderful, but when you have these competing currencies, it makes it very tough. When you're traveling around, there's no way to instantly have this value transfer back and forth. That to me is what Bitcoin solves. Then you can actually have competition. Like you said, I think we're going to have probably this, and I think it was CK 5 or 6 years ago that said that we're going to have hyper dollarization and then hyper Bitcoinization. And so I know, maybe a form of Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory that maybe a lot of macro people would think about. And that's probably where we go. We see it now, like with what you just mentioned. We see it with even look at the SpaceX and some of the really a military play in my mind of what's happening in America, where now SpaceX is going to be stuffed into people's retirements, 401ks here in America, right away. It's like the fastest ever from going a public company to then being stuffed in people's retirement accounts. So that right there should tell you. Then you have the Trump accounts. They talk about the kids. They talk about Trump accounts with adults potentially. That's, to your point, that's them. We're in a debt-based system. So this is what woke me up 20 years ago when I realized like Trump's on the Republican side. George Bush was Republican, but he's starting the bailouts. That's what woke me up. I'm like, whoa. Like that's not Republicanism. That's not what we do here. And so then you start going down the money rabbit hole, or you at least hope people do. And you're like, why is this guy bailing people out all of a sudden? Or why are we buying Intel or General Motors or Palantir? Now, some of it, Bram, is tough because we're in this weird timeline of life where you're in this game theory of, do I believe the CIA should exist? I mean, because of the timeline we're on and the amount of technology, there probably should be a type of CIA, but not in its current form. Like it's not, you can't have the current form of the CIA exist. But the game theory suggests that if I don't have some intelligence agency, but then China does, or whoever, or Britain does, or someone else, then they're going to get ahead of me. So I don't know. I'm not the person to square that circle and figure it out. My only answer, and I think a Bitcoiner's answer, and what you've kind of alluded to in this show and kind of done a great job framing some of the questions, is the incentives, right? The CIA or an intelligence agency or something like that, I can get in bed with that if it's built on Bitcoin. If it's built on a monetary standard where there's actual incentive for the consumer and producer, or for government and the individual to be on the same side of the table. And so that to me is where fiat is. There's such malincentive that you cannot trust anything inside that system. We just know once you eat from the forbidden fruit, now the entire stream, the oil spill, has now infected everything downriver. I can therefore now assume, I don't, like that's what, like,
it's corrupted
it's funny.
by definition, because
just by
the
definition.
incentive is never neutral, right? It's never, well, it's the incentive is always diluted. So you cannot really pinpoint to the actual motivation, right?
It goes back to voting, here in America, which has been a huge topic, or, probably largely around the world, right? Where you can't confirm the vote. So, therefore, there's going to be some cheating somewhere, or there could be a lot, or it could be a little, but somewhere there's absolutely cheating. We know we can't verify, because as Bitcoiners, we know that better than anybody. TikTok next block, right?
Every 10 minutes. By definition, right?
Just by definition. If
there's an incentive to
it's not
cheat or an opportunity to cheat.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is something that I thought of years ago, right? I think that is what Bitcoin exposes. Like that's why Bitcoin wakes you up a little bit, that you just accept that you are corruptible too, like any human, right? If you were in a situation where you could take advantage to
the temptation
for your own position, right? Or for something you support or whatever, like from a distance, it's very easy to say, I would never do that. I'm a morally right person, etc. But being in the position and having the opportunity, I don't know. I'm not so sure, right? I'm not saying that everyone would do it, but I think you need to accept that some people would.
Yes.
When they have the option, right? And I think with Bitcoin, that's where we are going to, right? That exposes that, right? If you want to use Bitcoin, you have to adhere to the rules, and you trust the rules because everyone else has to adhere to the rules. Like the agreement to play is the same for anyone, and that 100%. Is what kind of like mitigates that corruptibility opportunity, I would say, for the individual player. if you want to use that word, right?
And that 100%. This is the talk that kind of gets brushed aside. We don't talk about it enough in Bitcoin. No, I mean, people across society don't talk about it enough. But I think people are coming to it. I even hear mainstream legacy news people starting to say these words, actually: trust but verify, or verify, don't trust. So you're starting to see it because it takes time. I mean, 17 years into Bitcoin, and the lexicon, the memes of Bitcoin, all these things are starting to slowly seep into society because people are realizing, oh, I can't actually just blindly trust this election or these votes, no matter what side it is. I don't care who the candidate is or what side it doesn't matter. But shouldn't we want something that we can verify, or something we know what's happening? So that's the waking up and the leveling up of human consciousness that we're going through. We have to go through.
Sounds so basic.
So basic,
right? I don't know. Yeah, that's
the elemental level.
The wild thing. That's the wild thing to me. Like, who wouldn't agree to that? It's not. We're not even talking about Bitcoin. Just conceptually, right?
Just conceptually. And so that's this world that we are now entering. But because we are just entering it, it takes time. These things take time. And that's what's frustrating, because we want the instant answers. We want these things done right away. Because there's a lot of people, and I've talked to many people over the years. I used to be very political. I thought I was in college for politics, for political science. And before I left and went into economics, pre-law, garbage. And, there's a lot of people that believe the contrast, the problem that we face, again, as human beings being emotional, is we believe this undue belief that most people are good, that our leaders are good, like they just want to go to society to help people. Now that on face, like you just mentioned, could be true, but the incentives once you get there, because of the broken currency, are so strong that unfortunately, we also know this to be true, that there are a lot of bad people that are then, the worse the currency is and the more loopholes and the more shenanigans that are available, it's going to attract worse and worse people to that industry. And the trying to think of the word, but the contrast, or the thing that most people believe, most humans and most Americans, I'll keep using Americans as an example, if you go pull 100 Americans in the street, vast majority of them will say, well, no, like our leaders have our best interests at heart. And I've talked to many people, they can't get over the fact that there are people that are just doing what's best for us or our country or whatever. And it's just that's this old world that's seeing and waking up to this, which makes all this hard, right? This is where we talk about Bitcoin breaks your mind, Bitcoin breaks your models. When you realize, hey, my life, because of the malincentive, because of fiat, because of this, my life is a lie meme, my life was a lie. That's what breaks people's mind. Because once you admit, oh my gosh, what you're saying is true, Brandon, or what you're saying is true, Bram, or other Bitcoiner, then that is the admission that my life was built on a lie. And I might have made other choices in my life had I known what you're telling me to be true. And that's what breaks people's mind. And they don't consciously always think about it, subconscious, and their mind just shuts down. You see, the eyes glaze over, and they're like, no go. And they just put their head back in the sand, pick up their Kalshi or Polymarket app, and they turn the TV back on, and they're good to go. And that's it. So it's pain mixed with education.
Yeah, they want to catch the game.
Catch the game.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So we are talking about, I think, something that we see individually, and we act upon that individually, and hopefully we have a good idea of the big picture, right? And I'm saying hopefully more in the sense that anyone who's doing anything has a certain thesis or big picture idea, right? And this is ours. But realizing the time in history that we're in, I do think I actually talked about this today with someone, how fiat money is like the Plato's cave idea, and once you get out of the cave and you realize that the world is not fiat money, there's something else outside of that, right? When you go back into the cave, everyone thinks you're an idiot. So it's very isolating, because they're all trapped in the illusion, right? Like, how do you manage that? How do you manage thinking you understand it and acting upon your understanding versus how the rest of the world is still operating, or perhaps perceives you not in a way that that you want them to like you, but more like, hey, why are you doing this? Maybe just a simple question, more like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Like, why are you acting in this way?
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask my wife of how I handle it. I probably have more, just I don't even know, not mental breakdowns, but more just, you know, swearing, cussing, being an old hockey player, at night, late at night, than I ever want to admit. And she can share stories over time, but it's a very lonely world. Just for any Bitcoiner, for someone who's trying to do this. I don't know what word you want to put on it. I don't think it's revolutionary necessarily. It's just, you're just trying to, hey, this is the truth. But again, the truth tellers, the people that are going for the truth, you're always going to be persecuted. Christ talks about this, right, in the Bible. I mean, like, you're going to be persecuted. You're going to get tarred and feathered. Like, that's just life. That's how it works. And it's not something to shy away from. You need people like that, obviously, and that's where we were talking about earlier. Like, the 10 Commandments, that's the highest thing. Like, if people just follow the 10 Commandments, I wouldn't even need money. Like, I wouldn't need any of these things. But because we can't follow that, because we've ate from the apple, because we understand good versus evil, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, in the sense of, we are good people. Everyone is made good, but we're cracked vessels. We have the ability to choose to do evil if we want to, and that's the temptation. That's why to me, Fiat breaks multiple commandments on surface just by its existence. And so, how can you have good incentive? How can you have good, honest society, or good, clean fruit from a bad tree? You can't. It's impossible. It incentivizes that. And to be honest, Bram, this is why I'm hopeful, is because you see the malincentive and you see the temptation to do so many bad things, especially nowadays, to try to do whatever to get ahead. And the fact that there's not billions of people, there are 8 billion people. There's not a billion people, just mass warfare and just Mad Max scenario going on. That right there should be the confirmation that we are going the right way as society, that we are good people, that we are made in his image, because it could just be mass terror all the time. But the news, the media, the sensationalism wants you to think that that's what's going on all the time, every single day, everywhere on earth, in every corner. And it's just not. Are there bad things going on? Of course. Are we mortal and we all go to the same spot at the end of the day? Absolutely. And so you're going to have bad things. Bad things happen to everyone, just in different ways in life. And that's just life. That's, we didn't design it. Don't yell at us about it. But that's the world that we chose, our ancestors chose, and that's what we're dealing with. But that's why I'm so hopeful, because we have Bitcoin, because we have this world where, even when you have your friends, your family, your people looking at you like, dude, this guy is psychotic. Like, this guy is wild. You have to take solace in that fact that there are many people, many Bitcoiners, freedom fighters, truth seekers, whatever, saints, whoever. Like, there are many people that came before that laid down their life, literally and figuratively, to say, no, this is the truth. Come hell or high water. I don't care what king or despot or tyrant or president says anything about it. Some man. This is truth, and truth is truth. It doesn't change. And that's always looked lowly upon, generally speaking, for most of society, kind of like Bitcoin. Bitcoin price is generally sideways or down, except 10 days a year or 10 days a cycle. And then you look like a genius. Everyone's like, oh, Bitcoin. But it's a life of loneliness. Quite honestly, it's a life of just being beat up. If you don't love to battle, as my college hockey coach would always used to say, you got to love to battle. Hockey itself is in soccer, football, for those of you, Europeans, soccer for the Americans. It's a game of one-on-one battles and trying to 2-on-1 your opponent. You're trying to get an advantage. You're trying to create an advantage in that sense. But if you don't love to battle, then you're gonna have a hard time in life. And so, understanding all that, and that's why I have great hope, because it's okay. We're going the right way. I'll tell you this, Bram, I get very scared when a lot of people start agreeing with me, or agreeing with us. So, which you have to be careful with, right? Like, you can't just keep running to new things just because. You do have to check yourself. And I know I have to check myself and be very careful with that. But that, to me, is why I'm so hopeful, because there's not Mad Max chaos and pain 24/7 all day long for every human on earth. Okay, I know we're good. I know we're going the right direction. And now, because of technology, and this is why this is prolonged for so long too, and Bram, and I know you know this, but it's like, because of technology, everyone fights about technology, and you're so good and have so much experience with technology, et cetera. But technology has given us this ability to communicate and see these things we couldn't see for thousands of years. We didn't know what the king was doing. We didn't know what all these people, right, and the hurt and the pain, the things that were going on. Now we do. For some of the ills of social media, there's unbelievable good that comes from it, and we get to see and to communicate with each other. Doing this, you and I never would have even known each other, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And so now we can do this. We can share these ideas and realize, whoa, there's someone else that believes just like me over across the pond. or they're, that's insane. And that's
Well,
where
then there's some
patience.
sense to truth of truth
Mm-hmm.
in the idea, right? That's kind of how I look at it.
Yes.
This is a whole new conversation, by the way. But like,
It is. And
if
it minimizes war too over time, right? The more we know each other, the more everyone knows each other, and like, that's like, it minimizes war. Like, why all these things will happen because of Bitcoin, and then also knowing people around the world, having friends everywhere. It minimizes war, and you can't. Then despots can't just say it's those people's fault. They look a little bit different than you, or they talk different than you, so it's their fault. That was very easy for thousands of years. Now it's not as much, So. Yeah,
and everything has its shadow or bad side, obviously, right? Like same with social media. But yeah, I agree with you. It becomes more difficult to mask the truth. If there is a general truth or a truth, it's easier to find that, because it's easier to find other people that share your thoughts and that you can actually spend time with and spar with also, and discover together, and also pivot together, right? If you find something that you align more with, right? So yeah, I fully agree. Maybe two short questions to wrap up. So I wonder how you balance, you have a whole whole kindergarten at home, right? Like how do you balance that kind of like urgency of protecting them versus the patience that's required that we just talked about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've never been asked that before. It's tough. And we have two more on the way, by the way. We have twins coming. We'll have 6 in the fall.
Wow.
Yeah. So
living on the edge.
We're living on the edge, man. It's wild. I mean, and that's why I think Bitcoin's amazing too, is I came from the real estate world. I came from that world. I was very political. I was playing hockey. I was playing professional hockey, and then I was getting hurt, and I left. I hung it up at 24, 25 years old. And I just knew I couldn't keep going. I was getting my head was, bell was getting rung, and my head was getting hurt. And I was just like, I can't keep doing this. I don't want to be a vegetable when I'm 40 years old. And I'm 39 now. So fortunately I'm not a vegetable. I'm happy to announce that I'm not a vegetable at 40. And I wanted to be able to play with my kids. I wanted to be able to do all these things. And so I got into real estate and did that for 10 years. And you saw all this, you're doing this, you're raising funds and try to, buy property, buy rental properties. And you realize there wasn't people doing this. Like, I would teach people, I would go on Facebook Live. You remember when Facebook Live came out, and Instagram Live and all these things. I was marketing my Fiat business, and I was, people would be like, what do you do exactly? I'm like, what do you mean? I've been doing real estate for 10 years or 8 years, 7 years. And I would be talking about money. I'd be talking about gold and silver and what real money was. And I was talking about Bitcoin, whatever it was, the back half of the 2010s. And people, it just confused my market so much. And eventually it just kind of came to a head. And my wife is an attorney, and she works with her father's grandfather started a firm. And so she does that, but she's very nimble, agile with her work. And she's been doing that for a while as well. So we just got to a point, like during COVID as well, where both my business and the time it was taking away from me, and we had 3 kids at that point, I was just like, I want to spend time with my kids. And then being a product of the government run school system and seeing all that was already starting to become a disaster. And I basically took a step back and said, hey, and this is when I was finding Bitcoin Twitter at the time. So 2020, 2021, right around there. And I didn't know Bitcoin Twitter existed because I was in my Fiat business for 10 years. And I got away from politics, which got me out of Twitter in like 2009, 2010, 2011. And so I was gone from Twitter for 10 years. And so I didn't know Bitcoiners existed. And so I get on, like, during COVID, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, there's people like Bram out there. There's people, like I think Larry Lepard was like one of the first people I met on Twitter, in 2021 or something like that. And I was like, wow, there's like based, young people, there's based older people. Like, this is wild. I'm like, and so I didn't know, I already knew about Bitcoin. I already studied it and was like, this could be the answer, all that stuff. But then I saw like the people, like really meeting people. And so then it, again, just became very apparent and evident to me of as the kids started getting older and they started getting into school age, I was like, I don't want them going to daycares. I don't want them going to even private schools, government schools. So just glorified daycare, 8 hours a day. And then I'm at home working. My wife would be at home, sometimes at the office. And I'm like, why are we sending them away when they're here? So it just becomes this balancing act. And again, is it easy all the time? Heck no, it's not. And that's what we talked about earlier, loving to battle, producing more than you spend, saving in Bitcoin, and being in this world where Bitcoin is the true democratization of your learning, your conviction, your patience, all of these things. Because I always thought like, man, if you could, I love studying, I love learning. It's like if you could just monetize your learning somehow. And here we are, years later, this was, 15, 20 years ago. And then here we are at Bitcoin, and you're basically monetizing your learning, your conviction, your patience, et cetera. So that to me it was interesting. And then obviously building the kids up, we obviously do our homeschooling, but then, they'll watch Tuttle Twins. We go out and play and do stuff. I mean, kids need to play. They just need to be outside playing and doing things opposite what they do in government classrooms. So that to me is the big thing, and just making sure, trying to, feed them good stuff. Obviously they work out with me, things of that nature, just like do things like try to be the example, just be the person that, you want them to be as they're older, and the people that you want them to find. And that to me has been the big thing. The oldest one's 10 now. And so it's just, how can we keep doing that and building that up? And it keeps it young too, I will say, that's for sure. As you know now with the little one.
More kids. Yeah, love it. Love it. Okay, so last question, and I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief you will never let go
of? Christ is king. That's probably the one. I mean, there's something big. There's something bigger on earth than all of us. I know it's an interesting subject. Obviously, it's an endless subject, but there's something bigger than all of us. And I always take it to, hey, Christ is king. I'm a believer in God and Christ. And at the same time, there's something bigger. Right? Like if someone doesn't believe in Christ at all, or God at all, then I always just back it down to, hey, do you believe another man should be ruling over you and having, running your life? Or is there something bigger? Like, are we just a speck of dust on this earth? Kind of like the Carl Sagan, like we're just a little dot on this blue marble floating around in the vast, sea, vast array. And to me, there's something bigger than all of us. And I think that's, again, what reduces pressure and noise, and realizing, hey, I'm one man at the end of the day. There's only so much I can do, because this is the thing I struggle with the most. It's as a man, as a competitor, as an alpha male type of personality. I'm not the biggest alpha male on earth. I'm not going to claim that by any means, but it's just, as a competitor and someone who wants to be elite, you're always looking for, like, how can I help other people? How can I serve other people? How can we do the greatest good for the greatest amount of people? And so it's tough, Bram, and this dovetails right into that question you were just asking me a second ago, which is, it's tough when you have 4 kids or 6 kids on the way, and you think, okay, we have the kids here. Like, I need to do more. I got to write a book. I got to do 10 podcasts. I got to do, put out more videos. And honestly, it's just been trying to reduce pressure noise and trying to be more patient with my life, and, trying to meditate more, trying to pray more, and just, hey, God's going to only give you as much as you can handle. And we're all needed in certain places. And part of it is just continually reminding myself that you need to focus on what you can control, Brandon, and it's the people right around you. You can't be worried about what's going on in the Middle East every single day, or what's going on in politics, or what's going on in Bitcoin every single day, because the people that need you are right here in these 4 walls. And if you don't do that, and this goes back into the homeschooling thing and why they're with us more, and we don't want them gone from us for 8 hours a day, because if you build the people right around you, and then they can go out in the world and amplify that ripple effect. And then you think about, man, if other people start doing that too, and then they start focusing on the things that they can control right there, right next to them, the people, the eyes that want to see you, and they're looking at you. But if we're constantly looking across over their heads, like, what is everyone else doing? What can I do? What's going on in the Middle East? Then we're not taking care of what's needed right here. And so to me, that's the thing that every single day, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. Like, it is hard. As someone who wants to make change and see a better world, and a competitor, you want to, but then you have to just keep grounding yourself in that fact of, hey, the people right around me are the only things I can take care of and control. And that's what I try to focus on.
Awesome, man. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and this fun conversation. And yeah, man, let's stay in touch.
Yes. Thank you, Ram. Appreciate it. And we appreciate you having me on a ton. And then I can't wait to have you on my show. And when the book comes out, hopefully in the next few months as well, it'll be a version of Common Sense. So separating money and state. And so people can just, go to Brandon_Gentile, just my Twitter, Nostr, YouTube channel, everything, and they'll be able to find it there later this year. So a short little pamphlet for the masses, if you will.
Awesome. All right, man. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Ram.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.